From Worldwide Technology, this is the AI Proving Ground podcast. Today, AI is no longer a question of if or even when. It's a question of how. For enterprise leaders, the conversation quickly gets to a question of buy versus build, but the choice isn't always that simple. The real challenge is knowing why you're building it all, when to go private, when to leverage the cloud, and how to make them work together. In a world where your AI bill can spike overnight, your data lives everywhere, and technology changes faster than your refresh cycle. So today, we'll be talking with two of WWT's own, Jeff Fonke, an AI and high-performance architecture expert, and Jeff Wynn, who helps lead our advanced technology solutions team, about why and when enterprises should go private, stay in the cloud, or adopt a hybrid AI strategy. You'll learn the key readiness signals, how to tackle technical debt, where the real skills gaps are, and why flexible, data-driven architectures will define the future of enterprise AI. So stick around and get ready to learn. This is the AI Proving Ground podcast from Worldwide Technology, everything AI, all in one place. Let's jump in. Yeah, Jeff Fonke, Jeff Wynn, thank you both for joining the AI Proving Ground podcast. Somewhere along the way, our talent manager decided to book two Jeffs, so it's going to be a little bit of a balancing act here. But to the two of you, thank you. Thanks for joining. Jeff Fonke's second time, right?
Second time, yeah. We did one on the Proving Ground last time, so thanks for having me again.
Yeah, Jeff Wynn, a little bit of a rookie here, but I'm sure you'll do great.
Definitely a rookie, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah, we are talking about, broadly speaking, private AI and how to develop it, how to deploy it. As we've experienced it, a lot of conversations with our clients start with kind of that build versus buy mentality. And I don't know if that's exactly the right question. Maybe the right question should be, when is the appropriate time to build a private AI? Jeff Wynn, I'm wondering if you have a concise answer for when we should build and versus when we should buy.
Well, I'd maybe add one more W to that, and it's why. Why are you building this? I think that the same premise that we've looked around any data center is that the mix is really what's optimal to most of our clients. There's some value of looking at, like, I have workloads that need to be in a cloud, but there's some workloads that really have to be from that private perspective and how you want to transfer all of the data back and forth. So the why becomes, to me, one of the primary drivers. And so the why, Jeff, I'd love to get your take on this as well. It's going to start and end with, what are you trying to accomplish? What are the workloads that you're placing on there? What are the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve with it? And I think if we can start there, now we can start to inform ourselves about private versus public and where that goes.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you lead in with the why, because we talk about it as a practical approach. It's meeting them where they're at, and maybe starting off with a SaaS-based solution that doesn't need to run on a private data center, depending upon their use case, is the right way to go, right? And we want to help customers figure out the right way to go about it. And the why is so important, because we can't design a factory, if you will, AI factory, industry term now, without knowing what they're doing or why they're doing it and what that business outcome that they're going after is. So it's really about meeting them where they're at, understanding where they're at in the journey, and then figuring out how we can help navigate where and why they're doing that type of thing. So
yeah, I like the idea of doing it the practical way, and that certainly makes sense. I'm wondering, is one or the other easier, build versus buy, or they each come with a unique set of complexities that's going to make it an uphill climb no matter what?
I mean, when you look at customers can go out and do things very quickly in the public cloud, right? I mean, it's a very fast track. But over time, what we've seen is inference costs can go up the more they get adoption within their organization for the use case. So at some point, there becomes a bit of a tipping mechanism that we need to start looking at, potentially looking at the private focus and building potentially our own cluster out. And then they come up to a point where we have to figure out where the best place is to run that. Do we have the power and cooling needed in our facilities to do the use cases we want? Or do we look at a GPU as a service type of a deployment inside of what's industry's calling NeoCloud now, or AI factory, gigafactory, that type of thing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Last table setting question, Jeff Wynn. I think when we think of private AI and dedicated on-prem infrastructure there, we're thinking of larger enterprise organizations. Is private AI a solution that would apply to all sets of organizations here, whether it be down through the mid-market, or is it just for the big players?
I think it's for everybody. And we're starting to see those use cases of, let's call it a single pod, or the micro data centers that are consuming a smaller amount of power. You have a lot of processing units, because I think the more evolved and certainly forward-looking companies recognize this has to be a part of their business going forward. And so they're taking part of what they can do to at least trial it. We saw an advertising company just put up a single pod in a colo space to give themselves some of that privacy and really experiment with some use cases around how they can better engage with their clientele, leveraging AI to curate the right things back to the clients. So I think it's absolutely a play there. I do want to come back to that what's easier or harder. I think it's, from a cloud perspective, it's certainly easier. And that's that's the attraction to it. You sign up, you put your credit card out there, the PO out there, and you can start to work with it almost immediately. And this is the value of what WWT has built, is that you have that accelerator within our AI environment as well for our clients to go with it. The question, though, is that ease worth it for all the reasons that Jeff Fonke here talked about?
Is it that ease from an integration perspective, or answered?
Let's talk about easy. Easy can come in a lot of ways, right? Like I think when you look at, we haven't talked about data yet. Where's your data at, and what are your data sovereignty concerns? And I think, is it easy to start in the cloud? Yes. I mean, there's use cases, but if your data is not in the cloud, it may not be. Yeah. And if your organization is not, doesn't have the aptitude or ability or the resources to move the data and bring the data to where the AI compute is, then it's not as easy. So you have to really think about, and I get back to the practical approach, trying to understand the use cases and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then their approach to data. That's the data is the foundation and lifeblood of all of this, and really making sure they've got a strategy around that. That gets into where, whether it's easy or not in the public cloud. Yes, like you said, Jeff, I think, we see them, you swipe the credit card, get the, whether it's in Google or it's in AWS or it's in Microsoft, or in a co-location or a gigafactory, if you will, or a neo cloud. It really just all depends on, what their resources are on that they have internally, to be able to do these types of things. And then, that data piece is so important, where it lives and how they are using it for the use cases they have.
Yeah. Are we seeing any instances where a client thinks they want private AI or thinks they want the opposite end of the spectrum, and we're in a position where we have to say, actually, you can get away with doing something on the cloud, or yes, you do need to have a private instances? Do organizations understand where they need to be running these AI workloads from the beginning, or what should they be looking out for to try to figure that out?
I think there's a lot of storming going on in the marketplace right now. And I would say that not knowing what that is, or at least coming in with an open mindset about where you're at, that seems to be the norm. Yeah. And a lot of the reasons that Jeff just talked about is that the data estates that you have may be disparate already. So you get a little bit over here, a little bit over here. The use cases, we got back into the why aspects of it, start to dictate some of those things. And as they're formulating their strategy, they're recognizing, I got a pretty long lead time to get into private AI. I've got to build out some facilities. I might have to procure the equipment and hardware, and I might see a long lead time on that. And so a lot of that's going to kind of factor into it. And so what we don't want anyone to do is necessarily allow for speed to marketplace to dictate what the right solution is. And this is the practicality, I think, that we continue to refer to, is that pick those things out, and it may be both. It may be, how do I accelerate right now? And that might be a cloud instance with some data migrations, as Jeff talked about, and then leading yourself into a longer strategy because the right spot is for that private AI in their particular use cases. So a little bit of both in that case.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that it's not going to be just one solution for the end of time here. I'm looking behind the cameras here. I see a mixing board. Is that a good analogy of, like, sometimes the knob will go up for cloud usage, sometimes the knob will go down for on-prem, or we might raise it up? Is that accurate, you think?
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is there's a bit of a flywheel, and things get adjusted. You can use that analogy as the mixing board. We've actually, I think there's a slide floating around with that.
Maybe that's how it creeped into my head.
Build versus buy discussion, and build versus buy can be multiple things, right? It can be, can I buy a SaaS application that already has all the things I want to do for my primary use case? Maybe it's an AI agent or chat bot or something like that. The answer is yes. There's dozens, if not hundreds now of use cases where companies have kind of AI in a box. And they'll run it for you as a SaaS application, and you're okay with your data being consumed in a SaaS-like application. But when you're looking at the alternatives, I think you're going to see over time that may not be everything they need, and what they're doing in the cloud, it's an and conversation. They're probably going to have parts of their data sets that live in both places. And to be able to navigate those types of hybrid environments is going to be critical moving forward. Because let's face it, most enterprise customers are in both the public and in a private cloud, not all in one or the other. I mean, when the cloud, all the things with cloud started, a decade ago, we've seen that transition, and it's really an and conversation. Even the largest enterprises in the world, they're in both private and public.
From an infrastructure standpoint, how does everything we've already touched on right now, recognizing that it's a hybrid environment, how does that affect infrastructure decisions you're making on-prem? What do you have to do to account for the future where you're going to be making different choices?
I'll take a swing at that, and Jeff, I'd love your perspective on it. But it's really, one, we've talked use cases and the practical approach, that kind of thing, but it really depends upon how you're developing and if you got the skill sets. We see oftentimes, I think, and I talk about 4 pillars of high-performance architecture, right? It's high-performance compute, high-performance networking, storage, and then workflow. And workflow is where we're spending the most time helping customers understand how to bring these things to life. But when you look at that workflow and the automation needed, it really is, very complex. And to be able to structure what you need in the long term, designing that in the right way that doesn't put you in a position where you're pigeonholed into one or the other. And I'll just kind of complete the thought with the software needed and the tooling that you build these things on. If you do things in a very specific way in a public cloud, that may not be very easily ported back on-prem. And there may be some really, interesting critical work, whether it be at the data layer or in the software layer, that you need to be able to port those things back on-prem. I mean, NVIDIA does a really good job of doing some things in the public cloud with their cloud DGX cloud solution. That's a good bridge play to NVIDIA architecture on premise. But there's other ways of doing it with completely open source. There's other tooling things you can consider, different platforms. So I think those are things that we help our customers make sure they understand before they go all in one way or another, right? Jeff,
No, I think you're stating it well. Maybe to demystify it is, it's the same challenges they're going to have today in any other IT technical debt. It's just going to be amplified with the cost and the intensity of the high performance environment. So if you're holding on to 6 or 7 different AD domains, that's going to hurt you regardless, but it's really going to hurt you when you suddenly have this massive demand from your workforce and your clientele to start using these HPAs. And so what I would suggest, folks, is get after that technical debt as quickly as you can. It's going to make this transformation so much easier. Go even more practical is if you already have a data center and you're starting to contemplate bringing in your own private AI, you need space. You need power, you need cooling. Okay, well, no questions. Everybody's talked about this consistently with HPA, but where are you going to get that from? Well, you can endure the cost of bringing it all in, or you can start to look at is your environment structured correctly? Have you already done those consolidations of all of the data storage? Have you looked at your compute environment? Do you have 7 different versions of an application running, or do you really have a good structure where all those applications are living? And you've optimized for it. So really, really strong piece is that you probably had this on your roadmap already. This is a great catalyst to get it moving forward so that you're ready to adopt that AI pathway when you're ready for it.
Yeah. Jeff, Fonke, you had mentioned workflow as the area that you spend the most time with clients. Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it, right? It's the new DevOps, right? It's really the automating and doing secure multi-tenancy. Like if you're going to build your own private AI, there are ways and tools and tricks that you have to consider when you're designing that workload. And we workload management can happen at the cluster layer for orchestrating your infrastructure. Then there's upstack that goes into more of the MLOps tooling and capabilities that sit on top of that. There's a lot of different open source capabilities. And, you think about GPU as a service and being able to serve you as an IT organization, serving your organization to be able to do that type of a deployment. We've worked in our own labs to really kind of develop a plan around GPU as a service to be able to adhere to our data scientists and our architecture folks that are working and building these proof of values for our end customers. And there's a lot of complexity in that, right? If you want to like LLM as a service is another thing, and AI gateways to be able to change LLMs out on the fly. We're doing a lot of POCs on that right now, just really, kind of helping customers navigate those waters. And that's what I mean about the workload orchestration, right? I mean, should I use Run AI and NVIDIA's Mission Control along with, BCM that comes with that? Or should I, or where do I insert maybe an OpenShift platform and build my own automation that I'm already doing? And then what tools should I use maybe from an overarching capability? There's these tools like Apollo and Arna and Rafe that we're helping customers navigate and demystify the complexities and what one does versus the other. So that's the one that's really coming up a lot. It's just that it's something that there's a gap there because it's kind of a new space to live in.
Yeah. We've also mentioned skill sets a couple times and a gap of skills. Where do we see the biggest gap right now with our clients or the industry in general? Because, and I'm thinking that's the gap is going to be, even more in effect because once you have a solution, you have to have somebody that's going to manage it and tend to it on an ongoing basis. But where do you see the skills area right now?
Well, I'll start with, I think our hypothesis is where we thought the skills gap would come in has not necessarily played out. And so what we're finding is most of our clients have a very strong kind of that almost that data scientist level. They know what they want to try to accomplish. And I think in hindsight, when we look back at it, it's like, okay, that actually does make sense because if you're an oil gas company, you need to understand like geological formations to identify where you're going to be able to pull your next reserve from. If you're a pharmaceutical company, like talking about drug interactions has been something you've been doing for decades. You're just up-leveling that conversation. So what we're finding is certainly with our larger clients is that they've got a really strong understanding of their business. Okay, no questions there. And they've started to apply that into those use cases of where they go. Whether or not, and Jeff kind of mentioned it, there are so many new technologies flooding into the marketplace, and we're seeing new revisions of the software, new revisions of the hardware coming out as quickly as we can because your cycle is so fast of what you need to get from performance. That's putting a ton of pressure, I would say, on the traditional IT teams that we're seeing. So as Jeff mentioned, you put this thing in there and you're like, now what?
Right.
How do I configure this optimally? If you run into trouble, do you have folks who have that experience to do it? And they don't. And so a lot of times where we're finding, being able to add value to our clients is coming in there because we see these things dozens and dozens and dozens of time. We can help optimize it so that we can unlock their data scientists, unlock those use cases to go after it.
Yeah.
I think we'll have a second set of kind of that skills gap area, probably in the broader organization. So what we've observed, even in our own workforce, is that you have a lot of folks who are incredibly interested in it. And so they're interested in your own homegrown tools, but they're also out there with Claude or Gronk or anything else that is sitting out there. And they're trying to learn with that perspective. When they come back into the homemade tools, or they're coming into the corporate approved tools, those are different interfaces.
Yeah.
And so how do we optimize them to be able to consume that as well? So one of the areas that we're pushing quite a bit of like, hey, here's an investment you need to make is that what's the center of excellence for your organization? What's your strategy for adoption through the organization? And right now it's not a key focus for many because they have very defined and very small, here's what we're going to do. Here's the group that's going to have it. We're air gapped from everybody else.
Yeah.
This is our private playground. But that's going to change quickly. And so really, really encourage folks to start to think about where are you going to go? How are you going to enable? What is the training path for everyone to come on board with that?
And is that because whatever the use case might be, it's going to naturally expand itself, or there's going to be other use cases that can plug into it, and you're going to need skills there and there and there.
Absolutely. I was, and I'm sure we all have stories like this with my father, and he's like, well, something, AI, I don't even understand it. It's like a search function. It's just a better search function. And so his entire world is around an enhanced, I think he uses Google, so it's enhanced Gemini search function.
Right.
What he's not in there is he's not querying about his next business. He's not querying on, here's my likes and dislikes. Bring me a travel plan that's curated specifically to him. And so here's, an individual that he's going to use it. He wants to use it, but no one's guiding him on how to optimize it. Mm-hmm. Our own internal journey here at WWT is that we're seeing, Copilot is now infused in everything, that we use from a Microsoft perspective. Are we all, and I know I challenge myself with this every day, am I using that the most effective as we can?
Yeah.
Now take this out a year, that every aspect of every business we work with is going to have some form of AI. Are your employees using it the best they possibly can? Because if they're just using it as my father's using it as an enhanced search function, we're missing so much value.
Business value is
100%.
It's detrimental as part of that, and I love it because skills gaps can mean a lot of things. It can mean, I need a PhD in computational neuroscience to help me get this project off the ground. And it can mean I need to learn how to prompt that's more effective for myself, right? So I was just on a call today about prompt engineering. We do a fantastic training class around that to just get our own internal employee base familiar with chain of thought and reasoning, familiar with how to use an agentic approach, how to prompt with the right mindset that was very specific. So there's skills gaps within the organization as an employee base. And there's also a skills gap on just how to bring AI to life inside of an organization the most effectively. And I think, Jeff, you did a very good job explaining kind of both lenses, but I think what we see is twofold, right? I run an AI practice, so finding the right resources that can help educate, build things, do the right things. They know ML ops. That's a skills gap that our customers, we help with strategic resourcing in that case to bring the right resources into an organization to help with those types of things. But we've also built learning paths where we have to get an AI's driver's license to be able to do things within our own organization. So it's very broad and it can mean a lot of things. I think it means as inference continues to scale in organizations and in our personal lives, like your father's example. We all have those. It's just, there's such a wide array. And if you're not using and prompting every day, then you're probably not learning the techniques that are out there today.
This episode is supported by Google Cloud. We are experiencing one of the most significant shifts in history, where AI is creating entirely new ways to solve problems, engage customers, and work more efficiently. Google Cloud is ready to help organizations build a new way forward in an increasingly AI-driven world.
I do want to get back a little bit to the buy versus build and the hybrid. How does a organization, what are some of the calling cards or signals that would say, I am ready? Because readiness comes up so much when it comes to AI. How would an organization recognize that it's ready to start building a private solution versus building or whether they're ready to put workloads in the cloud?
I'll give you one quick example because it's an easy one. We've had customers come to us with a bill that is massive, and they're like, we can't keep doing it this way. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
That's the easy one. That's the tactical. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. If you're spending that amount doing it that way, we can probably, it's a financially very easy equation to say you can do it in two other ways and be this X amount cheaper. I think the other way I would say is a data readiness. If you come into it with an open mind and you've already curated 2 or 3 use cases and the data that is needed and you've maybe done some data work. You mentioned, maybe, in genomics or maybe it's oil and gas or whatever, you've got the seismic data and you already know your business and you just know the use case you want to do. That's one where we can say, all right, we know there's an equation we've got that's like, what are your input parameters, how many tokens per second, and what's the scale look like? We built a sizer in our lab where we can kind of go through some of those things based on use case. So I think if you've got a really good angle around your data and we can help you then, this is what we expect it to cost. And we're doing that right now, right? Whether it's working with our neo cloud providers that we work with or the public cloud. The thing is everything's a bit of a snowflake when it comes, because everybody's got a different cost structure and they may be doing certain things. So, but really to me, it's centered around use case and data, and then ideally have a good idea around what you want to do. as you mentioned earlier, Jeff, we can start very, very small with just a handful of GPUs if there's a few things you want to do and your data tolerance isn't there for the public cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I can take that from kind of an operational viewpoint and adding to it. So as you get very, very practical, the first place is, do you have a strong kind of data center strategy? What's your business continuity strategy? What's your disaster recovery strategy?
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to inform you where you want to place this. So once you identify where you want to place that, whether that's going to a colo or you have excess data center space that's already available and that you can use it, now we can start to plan for it. And so take a lot of the things that Jeff and his team are going to walk you through. What's that why? Right. What's that practicality to it? We can start to size some things up. Hey, it's a handful of GPUs, much simpler problem to solve for. Hey, we need to go with a super pod or something even greater than that from a size and GPU perspective. Now we really have to optimize that data center. So I would say that's the second kind of piece we would want to see and walk through is that, all right, ideally, geographically, we want to lay these things out here. This is where your workforce is. This is aligns with your current strategies. And we work through that analysis of the data center.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to give us, do we have the right amount of power? Can we support the weight of this? Everything else that's coming in there. And this is where we start to have, I would say, those next order conversations. Where does the data live? Can we put it near the storage arrays to it and start to keep moving up that stack layer and keep having very practical conversations through each one of those to make sure that they're actually ready to consume this when it goes live.
Right. And moving into the future, what is that balance going to change? I know there's always going to be considerations on where and how to do it, but are there any signals in the market right now that we're going to be running more workloads in the cloud versus on-prem, or is that remain to be seen? Or is that even a question that we're tracking?
I think so. For me, at least the conversations I'm having, it remains to be seen to a lot of things that we talked about before. Again, the whys continue to evolve and continue to change. Now, my personal gut is that you're going to see a good, healthy mix between the SaaS work that we have, and that's manifesting already. Google's embedding Gemini into all of their work products. We've seen that with Copilot.
Yeah.
And so we'll see that, whether it's a CRM or any other type of piece, you're going to see that embedded AI that's likely to live in the cloud, but it's going to be very meaningful for each one of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
I think then secondarily, it's going to be really around what do the economics look like from moving that data around is going to help dictate a lot of the decisions. And then last, but certainly not least, security. What's the security and the proprietariness of each one of these points of data, and how much do they want that to leave the boundaries of their own, four walls, and what can they trust and what can't they trust, from outside of that? And we see a lot of different opinions starting to form on that. I think it's loosening a little bit over the past year that where there's more allowance for those GPUs to live outside of those air-gapped environments, but it's going to be a key consideration that we're hearing from a lot of our clients.
Yeah. Jeff Fonke, you mentioned a while back, just, it all starts with data. No earth-shattering news there. But then you're talking about it's all about who gets the economics right of moving that data around. I'm curious, within the AI Proving Ground, which is the namesake of this podcast, a lab environment that we have here at WWT for clients and organizations to test out AI solutions. Are we seeing anybody doing anything innovative, without naming names per se, anybody doing anything innovative with how they tackle the economics of how data moves?
Yeah. I want to revisit real quick, just, completely agree with where we're at in the enterprise. I think we're still yet to be seen. Completely agree there. We're still early and it's moving so quickly. There's so many things that are happening so very quickly. Meaning last year we're talking about retrieval augmented generation. Now we're talking about, A2A, agent to agent,
right,
and model context protocol and all the things. And that's a good lead into the question that you just asked. Like, it's moving so quickly. How do they get their arms around it? Well, I mean, I'll tell you that it's moving fast for everybody. Even us, are the leads on our teams, the folks we've got, the architects, data scientists, and the things that we're doing in our AI Proving Ground. Right, it's the AI Proving Ground podcast. But it's an area where we do a lot of testing, a lot of integration work, a lot of thought leadership, thinking through the right ways of doing things, right? Right now we're testing AI gateways. We're comparing and contrasting various tools to be able to swap these out. So we can tell our customers with confidence that we've touched and worked with these products, and these are the ways that they work, right? But to get back to your data question, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different folks, right? So I think as we've done our own internal projects here at Worldwide, we consume our own AI products. You mentioned Copilot. Of course, we're doing a lot of data integrations with our SaaS-based application with Copilot, but we also have built our own agentic frameworks and platforms with Atom AI, and you'll see that if you go to the AI Proving Ground. And that has evolved immensely over the last couple years, and it's now a fully agentic platform that we've integrated into multiple data sources.
Mm-hmm.
And that work that we do, we don't just do that in a vacuum for our own internal knowledge. We like to share that with our end clients. So not just that, but the demos that we build and the lessons we learn, we're trying to apply to those industry verticals. And we're not going to be better than GM or Ford at manufacturing automobiles. They know their business. But what we may have is to be able to help them specifically with the process by which they bring the use cases to life, with the data that they got and the awesome expertise they have in the manufacturing field, right? Just as an example. So the Proving Ground's a place where, we've got the blinky lights, we've got the storage arrays, we can talk about the differences between all of that. But when you talk about data mobility and, extract, transform, load needed for moving data around, we're doing all that with our own internal projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have it from both lenses, if you will. We can talk tech all day long. I mean, that's been our bread and butter for the last couple decades. But I would say when you marry that to the data science and the data needed, you take the work our data science teams are doing you marry that to the technology that we have in the Proving Ground, and that's a pretty compelling place to go get information. So yes, those are just some examples of our internal and then the way we're doing from a technology perspective.
Jeff, Wynn, I mean, so Jeff Fonke had mentioned everything's moving so fast, it's so hard to keep up. And that's something that we hear from clients time and time again. And everybody just wants to feel like they understand and have their arms around this thing so that they can make informed decisions. Not necessarily a tech question here, but curious, how do you find time, or how do you go about making sure that you're feeling up to speed on everything AI?
I think forums like this, these are critical. There are so many new thinkers in this space, and staying abreast of the podcasts and those folks. And that's, I think, the wonderful time we're in, is that people want to share this. And I think that as we go on to this, and for everyone's out there, it's like, oh my God, I'm falling behind. Jeff stated it. We're all falling behind because of just the speed of this technology. But at that same time, I think it creates this camaraderie within the industry for all of us to share what our best knowledge is at that moment. And so I think, step number one of that is being abreast of scenarios like this. Like, what are people seeing, experiencing, and getting in those types of podcasts and sharing?
Mm-hmm.
I think number two is the assets that we've created here, within the AI Proving Ground. You have to get your hands on it. Right? So the simplest thing, you talked about the prompts in those spaces, is that, sure, we can create an entire library of prompts out there. That's an easy way to enable an entire workforce, smart way to enable an entire workforce. But we also need to encourage our workforce to go out there and play and get your hands dirty. So that's a simple way. And then as you move up the stack and you get into open environments like what we have here, it is going to give you a very visceral experience with it, which I think is going to be better than any of the books, because you can't even publish a book fast enough to keep up with this, to go through it. So those would be the two ways. Is, number one is just listening to what other thought processes and thought leaders are, and then two is getting your hands dirty as much as you can in the space. How about you, Jeff? What are you doing to stay up?
Yeah, I mean, I learned from the folks that work in the organization, just understanding what we're doing from an internal, just immersing yourself in it. It's like it's moving, like I mentioned earlier, and you doubled down on what, and somebody said in our organization, I think his name was Tim Brooks, but the worst AI you're going to use is the AI you're using today. He said a couple of years ago, and it was nothing's been spoken more true, right? I mean, now we're doing so much more with it. Like, and again, whether you're living and breathing it for your job role or function, or you're doing things within the business, I think having leadership that embraces it and is actually challenging our organization to be, and we're fortunate because we do. We are being forced from our lines of business and everywhere to be the best in AI, and I think having that mindset from the top down is super critical for our organization and organizations alike to want to adopt it. Just look at the kids in school, like, to me, they need to be using generative AI every day of their life because they're going to use it in the real world. It shouldn't be used as a mechanism to cheat, of course. Obviously, we can laugh about that because that's a lot of administration inside of these organizations. My wife's a teacher, so I get to hear about it a lot. But and it is there are risks there, but there's also risks for our students to not be using it and leveraging it. If we're as business folks, in corporations, whether you're in healthcare, manufacturing, retail, or oil and gas, you should be using it to be competitively advantaged in the industry that you're in. So, those are just a few thoughts that I've got. I mean, we're doing so much right now in our AI proving ground. That's where my team spends a lot of its time with the teams that run it, and it really has been a really valuable place, right, to be able to explore, build, and do these demos for clients to be able to see the art of the possible. So.
Yeah, Jeff, I liked how you mentioned, things are moving so fast, you may feel like you're behind, but the truth is, you're probably not as far behind as you may think. Sure, very big enterprises are doing incredible things, but by and large, you're probably not as far behind as you think you are. Just to end us here real quick, and I'll ask both of you, but Jeff, Wynn, start with you. What's the one or two things an organization or an IT leader can do right now to get themselves, in position to take advantage of AI as it relates to the buy versus build versus cloud?
I would say the first piece is I would look at the assets that you have right now. What's been weighing out there that you're sweating out just a little bit longer than you should have been sweating out? How can you help clean those things up and get yourself ready? And something as simple as just looking at the entire ecosystem, consolidating that storage, getting your data strategies correctly put together. That would be element number one. And that way you can start to have the conversation from a data-centric position and make those calls. Number two, look at the people. And how are you enabling them? Jeff's well stated. It's up to each of the leaders to set that example. Are you using AI in your day-to-day examples? Because when you make that investment, and that's going to be a large investment for your firm, not just from the capital that's expended, but in the transformation it's going to make within the workforce. Mm-hmm. Are your people ready to absorb it? And so that's going to maximize that ROI. So looking at it from those two lenses to me would be the if I have only choose two, those are the two that I would choose.
Those are good.
Yeah, we've always done it that way. It's never going to work again. Like those are the most non-innovative words ever spoken. So I think that doubling down on what you said there, that's making sure you're constantly looking at different ways of doing things. Obviously, modernizing your infrastructure today. If you don't have plans already in place and you're just doing the traditional refresh cycles and waiting it out, it takes 2 years to get power and cooling in some cases, depending upon where you live and where your data center's at. So you're going to be behind the eight ball even further if you're not looking at better ways of doing things with less resources inside your data center. If you're running spinning disks in your storage array, for example, I mean, just a very tactical, pointed way, like you got to get that stuff out of there, right? You've got to modernize. You should be running all flash. You should be doing a very dense, storage platform that can be able to do a lot less power and rack space to be able to make room for the compute needed. That kind of very simple, tactical thing to look at. But that's so I'm agreeing with you there. If I had to pick two, I'd probably agree with Jeff on the two that he mentioned there. One other thing, leverage our AI proving ground. I don't want this to be a commercial for it, but I would say we've gotten hands on a lot of different things. We've written some really compelling articles from the lens of our CEO, our CISO, and our CTO as well. So I think there's some really good things. And those articles are like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Once you finish it, then you start back over because there's so many new things that have been released in the last month. So it's an iterative thing that we continue to do and go on. So just, the research and the things that we do at WWT, I think can open eyes. Not that we're the end all be all, but we work with just about every one of the large OEMs that are out there. And we're seeing kind of the things they're doing and working hand in hand with their products, and then bringing that with people, process, silicon, and software all together in one place. So. Yeah,
love that. I mean, take advantage of the information that you have out there, whether it's your own, news sources or podcasts, or like you mentioned, the WWT research, and we have that out there on WWT.com. It could be a CTO guide to AI, CEO guide to AI, the CISO guide to AI, and lots of other guides and research reports that we have published. We are running out of time. Jeff, I don't think I mixed up any of the names, so kudos is on me there. But I appreciate the two of you taking out time to join me here in the studio, and we'll have you back soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, lots of great context from the Jeffs. After our conversation, I walked away with 3 key lessons. First, start with the why. Technology decisions should be driven by clear business outcomes, not by fear of missing out or speed to market. Understanding why you're deploying AI and the data workflows and outcomes it serves will determine whether private, public, or hybrid makes sense. Second, readiness is multi-layered. True AI readiness isn't about having GPUs in a rack. It's having clean, consolidated data, a modernized infrastructure, and people who know how to use AI effectively, from engineers to everyday employees. Addressing technical debt early will accelerate AI adoption later. And third, hybrid is the new default. The future isn't all cloud or all on-prem, it's a mix. Costs, data sovereignty, security, and evolving use cases will keep shifting the balance. So leaders should build flexible architectures, experiment in controlled environments like the AI Proving Ground, and treat AI deployment as an ongoing cycle, not just a one-time project. If you like this episode of the AI Proving Ground podcast, we would love it if you gave us a rating or a review. And if you're not already, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Or you can always catch additional episodes or related content to this episode on WWT.com. This episode was co-produced by Naz Baker and Kara Kuhn. Our audio and video engineer is John Knobloch. My name is Brian Felt. We'll see you next time.